Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Timothy here with Mana Rocks, and we're going to go ahead and just jump on in and continue our spoiler review, or first look at the spoilers from this time, Commander 2020. It is a Sunday, so I don't expect a lot of spoilers from the main set, although there have been a couple. We will cover those in a different video. I've been keeping kind of the Commander 2020 and main Ikoria set stuff separate, just for, convenience's sake, not to get things mixed up. Again, though, there might be some of these cards. I think they have been sorted out by the people posting stuff, which ones are specific to the Commander decks, and which ones are from the Ikoria set that happen to take a reprint spot in the Commander decks. You can tell by the bottom when it says C20 that it's in the Commander deck, but I don't know if that necessarily means that it's not in the Ikoria set or not. So some of these cards might pop up in the actual Ikoria set. I think most of the cards, in fact, I believe all the cards we're going to talk about in this video are specific to the Commander set. So if you've watched the other videos, you kind of know the routine. I have, we'll just go on a long-winded rant or explanation about how a card works or something like that. So if you like talking about, I don't know, sharks for 20 minutes, then you've come to the right place. If not, I don't know. You can always give me feedback in the comments below. Speaking of which, if this enlightens your day in any way, shape, or form, feel free to subscribe below to the channel. And if not, that's cool. Thanks for hanging out. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into some Commander cards here. Yesterday, we left off with the Nightmare Hydra, the X-Cost Nightmare Hydra. That's a 2/3 somehow. And then immediately after ending that video, there was like a bunch of other spoilers. So we're just going to pick up where they left off. And we actually get to pick up on a pretty cool note with a partner commander. It looks like each deck has a pair of partners, and not just partners, but partner with from Battle Bond, where both of those partners can be your commander. And if you happen to be playing one but not the other, you can like target to fetch things up. But as this isn't limited, so as far as commander is concerned, if you're playing one of the partners, you're probably playing the other one, and that gives you an alternative to a 3-color identity, right? I would love to see more generic partners that can just partner with other things, but I understand that may lead to a bunch of problems because of how good some of the original partners actually are, like Thrasios and Tymna and stuff like that. But for now, each deck gets a combination of partner with creatures, and we will start off with the Jeskai one. This is half of the Jeskai one. This is Braylon Sky Shark Rider. He rides Sky Sharks. You gotta do what you gotta do for a living, I guess. He's 3 and a red for a 3/3, so a Hill Giant. Very exciting commander, Hill Giant. And it partners with Shiraz, the Sky Shark, which we'll see here in a second. It's a pretty goofy card. Braylon says, whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Braylon and deal 1 damage to each opponent. So, again, the Jeskai deck is that cycling deck. You are going to be discarding cards quite often if you are cycling a lot. Braylon will pay you off, not only by getting bigger, getting bigger is relevant, but it also just dings your opponent for 1 each time you discard a card. I think there was a card in M20, the Buccaneer, Brazen Buccaneer, something Buccaneer. It wasn't Brazen, but it had the same ability. Whenever you draw a card, it deals a damage to each opponent. Whenever you discard a card, it deals damage to each opponent. Then it had some other text, right? But if you're in a deck that can constantly wheel, or you're looking to just draw and discard a bunch of cards, maybe you're, cycling a lot or something like that, then sure, Braylon is a way to turn that into actual damage. Not to mention, Braylon also gets bigger, right? Cycling decks tend to be able to go like cycle, especially if they hit like New Perspectives, which is a key card for a cycling deck, and I guarantee it's going to be in this Jeskai cycling deck. But Braylon will get huge while also dealing incidental damage to your opponent, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a cycling deck, right? People play wheel decks. We talked about that Jeskai legend that draws you extra cards the first time you discard each turn, and Braylon slots right into that deck as well. Or any deck that's looking to just keep cycling its hand over and over again. I'm trying to think of a good commander for that, because a lot of the commanders like shuffle back and stuff like that. But whatever, you get the point. It also has this extra added ability. For red, target shark gains trample until end of turn. Okay, obviously, if Braylon is your commander or in the 99 of your deck or something like that, then you don't care about that. But if you're partnering with Shiraz, then that might come in handy, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at Shiraz real quick so we can talk about him as a whole. Shiraz is the other half of the partner. It is Shiraz the Sky Shark. 3 white blue for a 3/3 with flying. And whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shiraz and you gain a life. So kind of the exact opposite of Braylon, right? Braylon makes your opponents take damage and gets bigger. Whenever you discard cards, Shiraz gains you life and gets bigger whenever you draw a card. So each cyclone, if you have both Shiraz and Braylon on board, will net a damage to your opponent, a life for you, and a +1/+1 counter on each of your commanders. Shiraz, I think, is probably the worst of the two, although this one has flying, right? If you're able to just draw a billion cards, this is going to reach lethal commander territory pretty quickly. In the pre-con itself, I could see this being a neat alternative to the actual commander, but that commander's so good, right? It just makes 2/2s for just doing what the deck wants to do, and it lets you start doing it kind of for free early on. Like, you get the first cycle for free, I believe. It's similar to the Morph deck, where the first Morph was free each turn, and you got to kind of just chain that off and just bury your opponents in card advantage. This one has an equally goofy ability for white and a blue, target human gains flying until end of turn. Okay, whatever. Again, these are not meant to be standalone. They really pull their weight when you have both of them on board at the same time. But one of them's 4 mana, one of them's 5 mana, and then you've got to start finding ways to loot and cycle and stuff like that. So in a normal commander game outside of, excuse me, precons, I don't see these being super powerful cards. Maybe Shiraz, if you can just find a way to draw a million cards. Gains you a little bit of life. Maybe there's some human deck out there that wants Shiraz in it for some reason, which is, you know, interesting given that the humans are in Mardu this time around, not blue. And then I think Braylon is the card that's more likely to see play in the 99 of decks, whereas Shiraz is a decent card, but I feel like not gonna see a lot of play outside of being partnered with Braylon as commander. So I don't know. I don't expect these ones to be super popular. Braylon is not a particularly good card on its own. It needs a lot of work. Shiraz just gets bigger as you play your turns, right? You're going to draw cards more often than you discard cards in a typical deck. And that's even true of the Cyclone deck, right? Because you still get that draw every turn, but you don't just naturally get discards or anything like that unless you're like mana screwed or something, which I don't know. Somehow that happened, but you have your Braylon on board. Whatever. Anyway, Shiraz and Braylon, not my favorite partners here. They're really goofy, though. I just like the concept of, you know, there's this Sky Shark and then there's this dude who rides it and they're like best friends or something. But we'll go ahead and move on from there. I'll let you judge which partner commanders you're excited for. In fact, I don't know if we saw all of them today. We're going to go over at least 4 of them I can think of. Let me know in the comments below which of the partner commanders you think are the best or which ones that you are interested in playing. And I'll let you know my pick when we get to it. Next up, we have Heavenly Whale. Okay, 4 blue for an elemental whale with Delve. For those of you who are not savvy to Delve, it means that you can help pay for the colorless cost by exiling cards from your graveyard. So this could potentially cost just blue if you exile 4 cards from your graveyard. You cannot exile more than 4 cards unless somehow this ends up costing more than 6 mana. It has flying, so we're talking about, in Commander, very likely a blue 3/3 flyer with some upside. You know, in Commander, most Delve most cards with Delve cost the bare minimum, right? You dig through Time or Treasure Cruise for like 1 or 2 very frequently. Then it says whenever Heavenly Whale attacks, you may put an instant or sorcery card exiled by Heavenly Whale into your hand. You don't get to cast it for free, but you do get to just essentially draw a card. So what this does is when you delve Heavenly Whale, you want to delve away a bunch of instants or sorceries, primarily cards that you probably cycled away, didn't have to cast, but if you cast a bunch of good spells and then Heavenly Whale can delve those away, you need to just attack with it, and then you get one of those cards back. You do then have to cast that card from your hand if you want to cast it, but it's a way to kind of recycle cards that have already been put in your graveyard, whether you cast them or not, and do it every time this thing attacks. It's got kind of that Jaliva complex to it, where, Jaliva comes down, it exiles like an expropriate off the top of someone's deck, and everyone's like, oh, well, we have to kill Jaliva now, so Jaliva never really gets to do its thing. Heavenly Whale is very similar, right? If you delve away a Time Warp and a Decree of Pain or something like that, then everyone's going to be like, okay, nice try, we'll kill your Heavenly Whale before it ever gets to attack. So, giving a card like this haste is very crucial. If not, it's a little bit underwhelming, but 4 mana, 3/3 flyer that might be able to attack and get you a card back seems really good to me. And it's really neat. I wonder if this is the type of card that might see play in Eternal formats, right? Eternal formats love Delve. I have no idea yet, but it's a cool card. I like that, it's a Delve card that actually cares about what you're delving away. Weren't too many of those before. I think Soulflayer cared about what you were delving away. Next up, we have Ravenous Gigantotherium. Sure. Okay, whatever. 5 green for a 3/3. Love it. Stop there. 7 mana 3/3. Sign me up. It's a beast. Just a beast. Again, beast looks really weird in a set that has like nightmare cat dinosaur beasts and elemental cat beasts and stuff, right? Just having a beast is strange. Just having a cat is strange. It needs to be a nightmare beast. Nightmare makes everything cooler. It has Devour 3, so as it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice any number of other creatures, and it'll get 3+1/+1 counters for each other creature you sacrifice. I'm not the biggest fan of Devour, personally. I've never really liked any of the Devour cards. I don't like Mycoloth. I don't like Bloodspore, Thrynax. They're just not my type of cards, right? Because I don't play a lot of token decks, so maybe that's it. And then Devour cards are just like embarrassing when you are top decking and have nothing on board, right? Which doesn't happen often in game of Commander, but imagine just drawing this and you have no creatures on board. Like, you're just never casting it. It has an ETB effect. It says when Ravenous Gigantotherium enters the battlefield, it deals X damage divided as you choose among up to X target creatures, where X is its power. Each of those creatures deals damage equal to their power to the Ravenous Gigantotherium. So if you devour, let's say, one creature, and this comes down as a 6/6, you get to deal 6 damage divided as you choose between up to 6 target creatures. It's weird that it's X target creatures. I don't know. But you get to split up 6 damage basically as you want among other creatures. Hopefully you're just kind of like picking off 1 or 2 small creatures because those creatures are going to hit the Gigantotherium back, similar to original Polykranos, where you could monstrosity it and start picking off creatures, but those creatures were all going to deal damage back to the Gigantotherium. So ideally, I think you want to pick off a number of creatures that are going to have total power less than enough to actually kill the Gigantotherium. And the cool thing here, too, is that you can sacrifice more than one creature, right? That was an example where we only sacrificed one creature. You can sacrifice, let's say, let's just go with 3 creatures. You have 3 creatures on board. You devour all of them. That's 9 counters, so this comes down as a 12/12, and you get to split up 12 damage among up to 12 creatures, right? So Gigantotherium, another kind of take on green removal here, a Polykranos type effect. Not too far off from a fight, but a fight that you can split up among other different creatures. So I don't know that this is going to make waves in Commander or not, but if you are playing a token deck and you need some more removal, Gigantotherium might be one of our new options here. Moving on, we have Nascent Metamorph. Metamorph probably means it's going to clone something, right? 1 and a blue for a 1/1 shapeshifter. Probably going to clone something. When it attacks or blocks, target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Nascent Metamorph becomes a copy of that card until end of turn. Then that player puts all cards revealed on the bottom in a random order, blah, 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 right? So if it attacks, you choose a player. It doesn't have to be defendant player, which I think is interesting, right? You get to kind of choose the player who's playing the big creature deck at the table, and they're just going to mill until they hit a creature, and you are going to become that creature. So you might be attacking as, a 10/10, or you might hit like a 0/0 Hydra or something like that, and then the Metamorph suddenly dies. The interesting thing here is that it also works on blocks, right? So it's kind of a deterrent from attacking into it because you might be able to block with it and then flip it into something crazy. You do miss the timing on attack triggers and block triggers, so if you like flip a Eldrazi or something like that, you don't get the Annihilator trigger because you've already declared the attack. But I kind of like the guesswork kind of nature of this, right? And there are some tricks you can do with cards that put creatures back on top of their owners' libraries and stuff like that. or like, if people have like a Courser of Crewfix type effect on board where you can actually see the top of people's libraries, then this is the type of card that the more information you have, the better it gets, because you can kind of pick and choose what it's going to be. Sometimes you'll blindly attack this into like your opponent's 1/1 and you'll become a 0/1 or something like that, something stupid. But for the most part, this is a cool card. It's hard for this to be worse than a 1/1 when it attacks. So if it's really early in the game, you might get to freeball some attacks, and later on you might just, Hail Mary into something crazy. And I like cards like that in Commander. So Nascent Metamorph seems cool to me. Just cool, not like absurd. Cool. Next up, Decoy Gambit, another cool draw spell. It's 2 and a blue for an instant. It says for each opponent, choose up to one target creature that player controls, then return that creature to its owner's hand unless its controller has you draw a card. I wish this could choose you too. Like, you get the option to bounce one of your own creatures and draw a card, or draw a card, right? But this is kind of cool. It's really just like a 3-mana draw 3, right? And it's one of those things where everybody's like, are we going to let him draw cards? Are we going to let him bounce our creatures like Ristic Study? Are we all going to pay for this? Or the tempting offer thing, right? If you don't take it, I won't take it, right? If you don't let him bounce your, or if you let him bounce your creature, I'll let him bounce my creature so he doesn't draw any cards. In which case, this might be 3-mana, bounce one creature from each opponent. The most problematic creature just goes away for a turn, right? Which is whatever. Bounce spells in Commander aren't super crazy if you're just getting rid of one creature at a time. 3-mana draw 3 isn't even particularly crazy in Commander, but I like that this gives people choices, and I'm a big fan of just having choices. You might even be able to use this as a political tool for someone who has like a good enter the battlefield effect or something like that. Or someone's getting ready to board wipe and you Decoy Gambit. It's like, all right, well, do you want these cards back? If so, give me something in exchange, because I guess if you bounce the creature back, you don't actually get to draw a card. I like this more for something like a battle box or something a little more tight-knit than a Commander game, because I don't expect a lot of people are going to play this in Commander, as the upside is 3-mana draw 3, and that's just not super impressive. It's fine. It's not bad, right? 3 mana for 3 cards is okay, but sometimes, giving your opponent the choice of what happens, not exactly where I want to be. It's not good at dealing with threats, so let's just put it that way, because your opponent can always be like, okay, just draw a card instead, you don't get to bounce my card. Next up, we have another partner, and these are the partners that I really like. I'm excited for these. Sazar, I'm going to assume Sazar, the Ruthless Stalker. 3 and a green for a 3/3 mythic human warrior legendary creature. So 4 mana 3/3, another hill giant, gotta love it. Partners with Okemah, Stalking Shadow. We'll see that in a second, obviously. And Sazar says, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. That's pretty cool. I mean, this is not like a wild effect to have on your commander or anything like that. This is just like a normal card, in my opinion. Like, just a fine card. And you have to deal combat damage, which, isn't something you can just constantly do in a game of Commander. And if you're in a position where you're constantly dealing combat damage, you're probably doing just fine without the extra counters. But Sazar is obviously going to do something combat related with its partner. And while this is the lesser half of the partner duo here, it's still kind of decent, right? You would never play this as a standalone Commander if you have the option to play Okemah. Let's go ahead and look at Okemah real quick since we're talking about it. And I think it's the art that I just like about this card. It's a whale wolf, because why not? Okemah Stalking Shadow is 1 blue, black, 3 mana for a 2/2 whale wolf, obviously. And it partners with Sazar, and my computer is going nuts right now. I wonder if you guys can hear that or not. Can you hear the computer? And it's calming down. All right. Anyway, 3 mana, 2/2. Can't be blocked. So that's supposed to obviously go with Sazar, where Sazar puts a counter on creatures when they deal combat damage. Your creature can't be blocked. It gets in there, it gets bigger. It also has a actually really cool ability. It says when Okemah leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life, where X is its power. Leave the battlefield triggers are some of the hardest triggers to try to get around, right? This isn't when it dies. This is just whenever it leaves the battlefield. If it gets bounced, if it gets blinked, if it gets exiled from like a Merciless Eviction or something, it's going to proc its ability. It's going to trigger its ability, and you're going to deal damage equal to its power, and you gain some life. You know, if you're in the type of deck that cares about getting little creatures in there, you're probably constantly attacking, which means you're probably getting attacked back, because that's what people do when they get attacked, and you're going to lose some life. So being able to gain some life back with Okemah is kind of nice. If you can get this really big, right, if you can like go hatred on this creature, kill one person, and then have it leave the battlefield, that's going to kill another person. That's a pretty cool little combo. Obviously, these partners are designed where you cast one and then you can cast the other one the turn after. This works pretty nicely with Okemah because you can cast Okemah on turn 3 and then turn 4 Sazar and start getting in there. Excuse me. It's a little weird that it doesn't actually do anything, right? It gets a little bit bigger, it just attacks, but it doesn't have much of a presence on board other than just being an unblockable threat, because Sazar is pretty easy to keep off. But what I think this opens up is a nice kind of, a nice deck for just tiny little unblockable creatures to get in there, right? I think if you wanted to play that strategy, you would probably play something like, what is it? I want to say Azuri, yeah, maybe Azuri, but I can't think of it. The one wherever one of your opponents deals combat damage to somebody. Edric, there we go. Edric the Spymaster. It was just on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, Edric decks are normally like a bunch of 1/1 unblockables and 1/1 flyers, and then you play Edric and you just keep attacking and drawing a million cards, and then you use extra turn spells to win the game. I think this would be a little bit different, where you just get a bunch of unblockable creatures on board, or evasive creatures, and then Sazar makes them bigger every time they deal damage, and that's kind of your game plan, is to build up a board of unblockable threats and stuff like that your opponent can't really deal with. It does require a little bit of work, right? Sazar is not a good standalone card, has no protection, blah, blah, blah. Okemah definitely carries the weight of the partners here, but it does open up a pretty sweet deck, maybe like a ninja deck or something like that, right? Okemah works pretty nicely with ninjas. So does Sazar, because if the ninjas are getting in there, they're probably unblocked and stuff like that. So I think this deck is pretty cool. I think, again, it's the art. Werewolf is kind of just interesting, right? You get to throw whatever creature types you want here. It's like everything is a Simic card on Ikoria. Like Elemental Otter. Everybody was mad because they couldn't play their busted Izzet companion. But here you go. You got another Elemental Otter, so calm down. Aeon Frolicker, you know, frolics in the Aeons, obviously. 2 blue for a 5/5 flying Elemental Otter. 4 mana 5/5 flyer, even in Commander, that's very relevant. But when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, target opponent takes an extra turn after this one. Target opponent takes an extra turn after this one. Until your next turn, you and planeswalkers you control gain protection from that player. And what that basically means is your opponent can't target you, can't deal damage to you, and your planeswalkers too. They can still mess with your creatures, which is really weird, right? They can just kill your creatures and target your creatures. Should be you and permanents you control gain protection, right? I'm giving you a whole extra turn. Why can't my permanents all be protected? I don't know. It's really weird that it protects like just planeswalkers and yourself, but not your creatures or lands or anything like that. Anyway, this is not a card you just want to play in a deck, right? I don't care if you're playing Elemental Tribal or Otter Tribal or whatever's going on. You don't just play this, cast it, and be like, I guess I'll give him an extra turn. He's mana screwed. No, you don't do that. You use this as a political tool, right? This is hey, we really need to gang up against that person. They're out of control. Will an extra turn help you? Yeah, well, I'll cast Aeon Frolicker, right? And I do like that they made this not an enter the battlefield trigger, so you can't just like go off and flicker it and stuff like that. It is a cast trigger, or rather it is an enter the battlefield trigger, but it only triggers if you cast it, right? So you can't just flicker it and stuff like that. It's almost like, I don't know, I don't actually love this card, but I like the political nature of it, and I'm a big fan of political tools. I just think a whole extra turn for someone is a little bit much when I don't really benefit off of it, right? What's the point of giving, you know, let's say we're heads up, right? It's down to just me versus you. I don't see the point of giving you an extra turn when all I gain in exchange is that I am protected from your cards for that turn, right? It's just giving you extra resources for no reason. So you have to use this as a political tool, although I like my political tools to be a little less powerful. I don't like the idea of giving anybody else an extra turn in Commander other than myself. So, I don't know. We'll see about Elemental Otter here. Anyway, a couple reprints that we can just kind of flicker through real quick. Silent Arbiter. This is the 4-mana 1/5 that says only one creature can attack and only one creature can block each combat. Whatever. I've never been a big fan of this game. It just makes things roll to a slog, and the type of decks that are playing it usually don't capitalize on being able to attack with one creature. I guess it's supposed to go with Okemah, where Okemah can just keep attacking, and then you have things back to block, I guess. I don't know. Silent Arbiter is a total whatever card. Same goes for Masked Admirers. I don't know how this card just keeps ending up in decks and stuff, but I have like 50 copies of Masked Admirers from a bunch of different things. I think this is kind of their go-to recyclable engine card when they don't want to put anything really strong in a deck, because Masked Admirers is just not that good of a card. 4-mana 3/2, ETB, draw a card. Whenever you cast a creature, if it's in your graveyard, you can pay green to put the Masked Admirers back in your hand. It's just the slowest draw engine in the world for Commander, and unless you're playing Elf Tribal, you can just find different, better cards than Masked Admirer. So this would be one of the cards I'd recommend just take out of your deck right away, because it's not that good. Cards that are good, though. Deadly Tempest. Deadly Tempest is, I believe it was in Commander 2015, the Ob Nixilis deck, and from the sounds of it, a lot of people didn't even know this card already existed. It is not a new card, it's a reprint from a different Commander set. Deadly Tempest, 4 black, sorcery, destroy all creatures. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see the card. I'm so sorry. Deadly Tempest, 4 black, destroy all creatures. Each player loses life equal to the number of creatures they controlled that were destroyed this way. So, like, reverse Fumigate. Fumigate gains you life for each creature destroyed that way. This makes them lose life for each creature destroyed this way. And sometimes this just kills a person who, like, made infinite squirrels and passed the turn or something like that. So it's a nice tool. It's a board wipe that I think is a little bit underappreciated, but maybe that's because people just didn't know it existed, and now we know it exists, and there you go. Path of Ancestry is back, and it's a common, so I believe that means it's going to be in all 5 decks. I love it. I'm not a big fan of there being, like, universal cards that have to be printed in every single deck, but, you know, there's, like, a good 5 cards that we're going to see in every deck from now on. Probably Path of Ancestry, Command Tower, Commander Sphere, Sol Ring. Those are kind of 4 go-to cards that I think should be in every single deck. Oh, Arcane Signet now as well. So, did I say Arcane Signet? I don't remember. Whatever. Path of Ancestry, just very welcome. There's one tribal deck, too, where it's even better. The human deck. New cards, though. Binding Ornament is 3 colorless mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, so just your traditional 3 mana rock. We here at Mana Rocks are a big fan of Mana Rocks, just so you know. And for 4 mana, you can tap it, and each player who controls a card named Binding Ornament draws a card. This is a really neat effect. Obviously, this is a common, so if you're playing precons against each other, it's not unlikely that people will have Binding Ornaments on board, in which case, you know, this is either a drawback where you might be drawing somebody else a card, or you can team up with somebody and say, hey, I'm going to pay 4, draw us both a card, I'm using my mana, how about you leave me alone for a turn? And they'll be like, okay, on my turn, I might return the favor, right? Again, a kind of political tool. This isn't better than, like, I mean, I guess in just a normal Commander game, if you're not playing precons and you need a 3 mana rock in your deck, this is one that can draw you cards in the late game, so it's not the worst. It's certainly not the best, but you could do worse than just a 3 mana accelerant mana fixer that also has some draw power attached to it. So pretty cool card. I like the design of it. This will be a lot more interesting if you're playing precons against each other than if you're just playing, you know, it as a card in a normal deck. Reprint Jace, Architect of Thought. I'm assuming, again, that there's just a Planeswalker in every deck. Better than last year's Ralzerix and Vraska the Unseen in the Morph deck for some reason. I don't know. Jace, Architect of Thought is actually a pretty good card, and it's a reprint. I'm not going to go over its abilities here, but it's got the Mini Factor Fiction as a -2, which you can do twice, and then the +1 is actually pretty relevant, shrinking your opponent's creatures. -8 is fun too. You get a card from everybody's deck, but if you don't know Jace, Architect of Thought, I'll let you go ahead and look that one up on your own, because I want to spend most of my time talking about new cards, not reprints, but we do have to spend just a minute on Villainous Wealth. the reverse Genesis wave, if you will. You target one player for X, you exile the top cards of their library equal to X, and you can just cast all those cards for free as long as the mana cost is X or less. This is just a sweet, like Sultai finisher type card. Very rarely do you actually win the game, but if you can cast like X's 15 or more, then you should be able to get enough resources, and you always target the person who's playing like the busted green deck or something, and you just go off with someone else's deck. I mentioned last time I'm a big fan of the strategy of just playing with my opponent's cards. I like the kind of steal your stuff commanders. I like cards like Gonti, Mind's Dilation, so on and so forth. So obviously Villainous Wealth kind of like tickles my fancy, and it's always been a fun pet card. Plus, we called it yesterday, there's the Hydra that makes other Hydras whenever you cast X spells, and it's Sultai color, so it was like very obvious that Villainous Wealth was going to be printed here, but nobody worries about Villainous Wealth. It's also sweet, like, you don't even mind when someone else Villainous Wealths you, because they're going to win with your cards, and you can just be like proud that your cards are winning. Anyway, not a lot of time on reprints. Marshal Impetus is up next. So we saw the red Impetus yesterday. Turns out it's going to be a full cycle. All uncommons that give a stat boost and goad the enchanted creature, and then give you some sort of ability, some sort of extra bonus whenever that goaded creature attacks. So Marshal Impetus is the white one. It's 2 and a white. It is enchant creature, blah, blah, blah. The enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and is goaded. So obviously these impetuses you want to put on your opponent's creatures, so that goaded matters. Note that if you're 1 versus 1, goaded just means that creature has to attack you, but you force it to attack, right? So it doesn't stop the creature from attacking you. It just means that if you're the only person left and a creature is goaded, it has to attack you. And it says whenever enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents get +1/+1 until end of turn. So another card that says, first off, you're goaded, attack someone else, leave me alone. Second off, you might as well swing all out because all your creatures are going to get pumped too. So a Gehiji type effect, right? Where if you are attacking my opponents, you're going to get some sort of benefit. You can still attack me with your other stuff, but you're going to lose out on extra damage, extra life, like gain in life, whatever, if you attack me. So you might as well send things at other people. We'll see, I think, all of the other impetuses here, but as cool as the cycle is, I don't think they're actually very good, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Let's go ahead and move on to Verge Rangers. 2 and a white for a 3/3 first strike. That's not bad. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. I always love that ability because my opponents do it, and I always think they're like cheating and just like looking at their top card before their turn starts. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, I can look at the top card anytime. I'm like, right. Okay, go on. Carry on. Excuse me. It says, as an opponent, or I'm sorry, as long as an opponent controls more lands than you, you may play lands from the top of your library. You can obviously only play 1 land per turn still, but this is them attempting to give white some sort of card advantage. It's not ramp, right? This will not ramp you, but it gives you kind of like the green play lands off the top, play cards off the top ability, you know, the blue play cards off the top ability, but only if you're behind. I hate that white needs its own form of ramp, its own form of card draw and stuff that doesn't say, hey, if you suck and you're in last place at the table, then now you get a benefit so you can catch up, right? That's what all these white cards say. They're like, hey, if someone at the table is doing better than you, now you get to do the thing that you want to do, right? If you're in first place, too bad. You need to fall behind before you can use these effects, which is interesting, right? Obviously, you're playing white. Someone at the table is always playing green. They're going to have more lands than you. You know, Knight of the White Orchid is a sweet card. So if you can somehow not have the most lands in play and fall behind some other player, this does give you card advantage. Unfortunately, white's not very good at setting up its own library and stuff like that, so I don't know, maybe scroll rack lands to the top. But it's a cool tool for white. White needs more stuff like this, but I do think this doesn't solve white's problem. I think white needs its own standalone ramp ability that doesn't require you to always be in like last place or second place or something like that. We're going to see another card like that here shortly too. Next up, Species Specialist. It's a fun one to say. 2 black for a 2/3 human warrior. It's a rare, whatever. As Species Specialist enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card. So this is going to come in the human deck, I assume. And it's a really cool card because you, let's say you're just playing at a table, someone's playing elf ball or something. Do you name elves because your opponent's elves are going to die and draw you a card? Or do you name like human because you're playing the human deck and when your humans die, draw a card? It gives you kind of an interesting dynamic, right? Because it's not just when a creature your opponent controls dies, if it's the chosen type, draw a card or something like that. So you might actually benefit more for choosing your own creature type, which I assume is what you're supposed to be doing in the pre-con, than choosing a creature type that your opponents might control or something like that. It also triggers on itself, right? So you're probably already incentivized to name human or warrior or something like that. There are warrior decks out there with Nagila and stuff like that. So Species Specialist, again, I just like tribal cards. This is a fun card to play in a tribal deck that, you know, cares about humans or warriors. I'm not sure I would go running this in like my zombie deck or something like that, because most popular tribes already have their own good form of card draw. Like, you know, zombies have Midnight Reaper, things like that. Warriors, I'm not sure warriors have something that good that cares about creatures dying, but Species Specialist is a cool little tribal card to have. I'm not going to complain about it. Nahiri the Harbinger is back. Again, I'm not going to sit here and read this card. Not a super great commander for not a great planeswalker for commander, because you don't really get to -8, which is the whole appeal of this card. But it does deal with enchantments and artifacts and can deal with creatures. So I found the -2 to be relevant in my Super Friends deck. I don't know. You can play this in just like a Boros deck and it's fine, right? I don't know what deck this is going to come in, but it's whatever. It's probably coming in the Cyclone deck, right? Because you discard a card and then draw a card. But Nahiri's a good one, and it's actually decent reprint value, right? It's not a super expensive card anymore, but it's also not super cheap. So Nahiri's fine. You look it up if you want. It's one of the better planeswalkers that they're going to reprint for us here. We have next up Titan Hunter, another human warrior. It is a 4/5 for 5, 4 and a black. 5 mana, 4/5 human warrior. It says at the beginning of each player's end step, including yourself, if no creatures died this turn, Titan Hunter deals 4 damage to that player. So it's a little bit annoying that if you just run out Titan Hunter on turn 5 and then you pass the turn, you're going to take 4. So obviously you probably want to get in combat this turn or that turn and then play Titan Hunter second main, and hopefully a creature died some time during the course of your turn, and then you can kind of get around the triggered ability on your end step and then just pass it along to your opponents, and now they have to deal with it, right? It kind of gets action going, right? It says you're going to take a lot of damage. 4 damage is not negligible in Commander. You're going to take some damage if you don't make a creature die this turn, right? So if you don't get into combat or you don't use a removal spell, you don't sacrifice a creature, whatever, then you're going to take 4 damage, and then that happens on everybody's turn. It also gives you kind of a way to circumvent its own ability. It says for 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, gain 4 life. Not the best use of your creatures, right? I don't want to sacrifice my creatures to just gain 4 life, but if you have other sacrifice outlets and you have creatures worth sacrificing, you can just sacrifice to those. You don't have to use this ability. It just cares if a creature died this turn at all. It doesn't care, you know, how that creature died. It doesn't care whether you use this ability to sacrifice a creature or if you sack to a Viscera or something like that. Woestrider, my new favorite Viscera. But I do like this card. I like cards that get action going, that just passively say, hey, if something doesn't happen, you're going to take some damage, and it's just going to keep happening. And the fact that this happens to everybody makes it really fair. And, you know, 5 mana, 4/5, whatever. Those are fine stats for Commander. So this can attack, this can block, blah, 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 so on and so forth. I think it's a cool card. I don't know that it's a card that is going to see a lot of play out of the precons, but it's really cool. All right, the blue impetus is Psychic Impetus. It's 2 and a blue for an aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded. Same thing as the rest, although the white one was +1/+1, so the stat value does change. And it says whenever enchanted creature attacks, you scry 2. Note that you control the aura even if it's on your opponent's creature, so you will scry 2 whenever your opponent's creature attacks. I like this one very little. I don't know what kind of blue deck really wants to play this sort of card. Yeah, blue can benefit from having your opponent's creatures just stay off your back, so any of these impetuses are good at just being put on a giant creature that you don't want attacking you, and it's fine. It's just scry 2 is not a really good bonus. I'm assuming they tried this as like whenever the enchanted creature attacks, draw a card, and you know, that would be a lot better, I think, than Scry 2. And it's not that Scry 2 is nothing, it's just that it's not really much of an upside to play this card. If I want this card, it's because I'm in blue, I don't have the option to play the other impetuses, and I just want to keep a creature off my back, right? So, not my favorite one, probably my least favorite, actually. We'll see. No, the green one might be my least favorite. We'll see when we get to the green one. I like this card, Agitator Ant. He's like, oh, come on, bring it on, bro. Agitator Ant is 2 and a red for a 2/2, and it says at the beginning of your end step, each player may put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Goad each creature that had a counter put on it this way. And you get to do it too, which is really interesting. You can put 2+1/+1 counters on one of your own creatures, and it does goad that creature, which means that it has to attack during your next turn, but since you're the one goading it, you can kind of freely choose who you want to attack. But everybody else gets the choice of, hey, do you want to make your creature bigger? And a lot of times they will. If you want to make your creature bigger, then you're not attacking me with it next turn, right? There was a card like this in the Kaneos and Tiro group hug deck from the 4-color decks called Orzhov Advocist. And it would do the same thing on upkeep. You could put 2, or anybody could choose to put 2+1/+1 counters on one of their creatures, but if they did, they couldn't attack you until your next turn. And Agitator Ant is very similar, right? Except it doesn't stop them from attacking you at all, it just stops that one creature from attacking you. So I think this is a really cool card, and I like that it triggers on the end step. Again, it just keeps action going, right? Creatures are going to get bigger. When creatures are goaded, they have to attack, so it makes things happen. This is a card from the actual Ikoria set. We will save that for a separate video, so skipping over it. It's also in a different language, so I have no idea what it does. Next up, Daring Fiend Bonder. This is some really gnarly art. What is going on here? I guess he's bonding with fiends. I don't know. 3 and a black, 5/1, human warlock with haste and must attack each combat of Able. So if you play this on your first main phase, it has to attack when you go to combat. So if you need this to block, play it during your second main phase. Pro tip. 1 and a black, exile Daring Fiend Bonder from your graveyard. Put an indestructible counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, that's kind of cool. You know, 4 mana, 5/1 haste. Whatever, like, I guess that's fine in Commander. Your opponent is incentivized to block that. You know, 5 is a decent amount of damage, but they can just chump with a token. And then you get a little bit of extra value from the graveyard where this can make something permanently indestructible. And I guess that's pretty cool, right? I don't know what decks want this, but it's a nice way to protect a commander or something like that, because you can just put an indestructible counter on a commander, and putting an indestructible counter is better than like holding up a trick to make a creature indestructible, because the counter is permanent. So as long as that counter stays on that creature will remain indestructible. So I don't know, this is fine. I don't think it's super exciting, but if you have a commander that's really worth protecting, then Daring Fiend Bonder seems like a fine way to protect it. I don't know. Not super excited about that one, as you can tell by my voice. Glade Muse is up next. 2 and a green for a 2/4 beast. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, that player draws a card. Okay, and it's a force draw. So this looks like the type of card that could backfire, right? This incentivizes people to play at instant speed on other turns, and every time they cast a spell on someone else's turn, they'll draw a card. Works for you as well, right? If you're casting spells on your opponent's turns, you will draw a card. Basically, every spell you cast on someone else's turn cantrips, and that's a little bit risky. This is going to give your opponents a lot of card draw, and it's similar to like a Howden Mine effect. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, I'm going to use my resources, a card from my hand, and my mana to put this thing on the board, and then everybody gets to reap the benefit of it, but you never had to put an initial investment into it. So I'm not a big fan of that unless you can break the symmetry somehow. So if you're just playing everything at instant speed, Glade Muse gets better, but it's a risky card. It has the potential to draw everybody at the table a bunch of cards, so if you're playing a group hug style deck, go for it. It's cool, but I don't know. Seems risky. All right, here's a really cool card. Manascape Refractor is 3 colors mana. It's for just a regular artifact, enters the battlefield tapped. It has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield. So it gains every tap ability of every land on the battlefield. That means if you've got your Cabal Coffers on board, this has Cabal Coffers ability. If there's nothing but basics on board, it has those abilities. It can tap for any color already. If there's like a Maze of Ith on board or a utility land, it can do that. You know, it can be a strip mine if you really need it to be a strip mine, so on and so forth. Basically, anything that a land does by tapping to activate an ability, Manascape Refractor can do the same thing. It has Thespian Stage's ability, which is really weird. Like, what happens if you use Thespian Stage's ability on this to copy another land? I have no idea. I assume this becomes a land or something like that. Maybe not. Whatever. Anyway, complicated rules interactions aside, one more line of text that says, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to pay the activation costs of Manascape Refractor's abilities. So you don't have to worry about actual activated color costs in the activation of this, right? So this is a really cool card because at face value, it's just a 3 mana rock that taps for anything. And then it has all these extra abilities, presumably, on board. It doesn't get passive abilities, so don't misread that. This isn't just like your Glacial Chasm or, Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale because you have $2,000 cards in your decks or whatever. This is just activated abilities, but that's really awesome. The fact that at base value, it taps for anything already, and then it can just be every utility land that's on board at the same time is really awesome. So I like this card. I think it's really cool. Lands decks will almost certainly play it. There's probably some really funky things you can do with, like, I don't know, I have no idea. There's some funky things you can do for sure, like the Thespian Stage thing we already mentioned, but every utility land on one card seems really cool to me. Anyway, moving on to less cool cards. It's fine. It's fine. Look, I'm not knocking it. It's just, we read the really cool card and then we're going to just a creature. Anyway, Famebreaker, it breaks fangs, I assume, is 4 GG, 6 mana for a 6/6 with Mutate for 3 and a green. So, again, we haven't seen too many Mutate cards today, but you can pay 4 mana to put this on top of something and make it a 6/6 with all the other cards' abilities, or you can put it underneath it and basically give its abilities to whatever creature you're putting underneath it. It says, whenever this creature mutates, destroy target non-creature permanent, its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. So you get to beast within something, but it can't hit creatures. Which is a little weird, right? Why can't this hit creatures? I have no idea. But anyway, that's fine. That's a fine ability, right? You get to deal with any non-creature permanent. You can blow up a land with this. You can take care of an artifact or enchantment. It can kill a planeswalker. Pretty versatile. The mutate cost is fairly cheap, right? 4 mana to basically more or less sacrifice one of your own creatures to trigger this ability is nice. And keep in mind that's whenever this creature mutates. So if you continue to mutate onto this creature, onto whatever mutated creature you have on board, then this ability will continue to trigger. So it's actually repeated destruction too if you have a bunch of mutate cards in your hand. So we'll see how that deck plays out. It seems really risky in Commander, especially to just keep mutating onto the same creatures, but guess we'll see. All right, the green impetus is Predatory Impetus. It's 4 and a green for an aura. It gives the enchanted creature +3/+3. It must be blocked available, and it's goaded. So same kind of deal, except this one gives a bigger boost, +3/+3, and it must be blocked. So it kind of not only forces the action on the attack, but it forces someone to be able to block it too. My problem, this one's 5 mana. 5 mana is too much to be doing this, right? In the precons, this is going to be cool. You throw this on someone's commander, and suddenly they're like, I have to attack, and someone has like a Death Toucher on board, and they block and trade, and you're like, haha, I orchestrated this situation, or whatever. But outside of that, you're just not going to pay 5 mana for an aura. Again, these impetuses, we looked at red, blue, white. We haven't seen the black one yet, so I'll complain about them when we get to the black one. But I'm not a big fan of this card. Not really. It doesn't give you the benefit. All right, next up, Spellfire Phoenix, continuing a line of phoenixes that are not legendary for some reason. 3 red for a 4/2 flyer. That's whatever stats for commander. 4/2 flyer, I don't know. I feel like you can make a phoenix whatever stat line you want, and people would be like, it's a phoenix, it's cool. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may return an instant or sorcery card with Cyclone from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, that's pretty sweet. And at the beginning of each end step, that's each end step, if you have cycled at least 2 cards this turn, return Spellfire Phoenix from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, that's actually a really cool cycle and payoff, right? Because it gets in this kind of loop where you play this, you get a cycling card back to your hand, the Phoenix ends up dying, trading off, doing whatever, maybe you sacrifice it to some effect, and then before it gets to your next turn, you cycle 2 cards, one of which you got back off the Phoenix, then you get the Phoenix back, and you can kind of keep looping that. So it's not a super powerful card on board. It doesn't have haste or anything like that. It's just kind of a big statted flyer, and, those are relevant in Commander, but it has this kind of loop where it gets you extra value. And even the first time, I said this when we were talking about the actual standard set, sometimes it feels bad to cycle away some of your important cards just because you need to hit more action or it's not the right time to play them. Spellfire Phoenix is pretty cool because it means that you can cycle away a really important card early on in the game, and then the Phoenix can just give you that card back later on. So it takes away kind of the feel bad of having to cycle away a card that actually has a relevant ability if you had to cast it, right? Phoenix is cool. The Cyclone decks, I think, is going to be really popular just because it's kind of like the quirky mechanic-based deck, and I think the Phoenix is going to serve a role in that deck, so it's not bad. Pretty happy to see it. It's also a really cool Phoenix. I like when the Phoenixes incorporate like other colors. It just makes the Phoenix look unique compared to the million other Phoenixes that are just flaming birds of fire. Next up, Selective Adaptation. 4 GG, 6 mana sorcery. Reveal the top 7 cards of your library. I always wonder how they came to the number 7. I don't know. But anyway, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Choose from among them a card with flying, a card with first strike, and so on. For double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. Notice this one has haste on it, but there's no haste on the big bug. Put one of the chosen cards onto the battlefield, the other ones into your hand, and the rest of those cards into the graveyard. So you get 1 creature with each ability. You get to put whichever the best one is on board, and you actually get to draw the rest, which is nice. Let's say top 7 cards. How many creatures are you going to hit? Let's say you hit 3, right? And you've built your deck in such a way, or you're playing the precon where they all have abilities on them. So you get 6 mana for a free creature, plus you draw 2 other creatures. That seems pretty good, right? If this just put all the cards in your hand, it'd be a little sad, right? Because you wouldn't be affecting the board. But Selective Adaptation does hopefully affect the board while also drawing you a couple other cards. It also has the, ability to miss. This is the type of card that sometimes you flip like 4 cards and there's no creatures, and then you just like flip 3 more lands and everybody at the table's like, oh, he missed on the Selective Adaptation, what are the odds? And then you do math, or at least you act like you're doing math. It's a cool card. Will play really nicely in the precon. Again, I'm actually excited for that commander because, the deck building restriction that it gives you is kind of nice. Don't think you will play this card much outside of that because they're just better ways of cheating creatures into play. Selvalis Stampede, Natural Order, blah, blah, blah. But it's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and move on to another partner, Howden, Avid Arcanist. This looks like a Simic card. This was supposed to be a Simic card, wasn't it? You can't lie to me, Wizards. 2 and a blue for a 1/4 human wizard. It partners with Paco, the Arcane Retriever. And this card is interesting because Howden does nothing by himself. This is the definite Regna of the 2 partners, but Howden is kind of like embarrassing by himself. He needs the partner to do anything. It says you may play non-creature cards from exile with fetch counters on them if you exiled them, and you may spend mana as though or mana of any color to cast those spells. So this means nothing unless we read the other cards. So let's go ahead and read Paco real quick. But remember that while Howden's on board, you get to cast exiled cards with fetch counters on them with any color of mana. Paco, Arcane Retriever, is 3 red-green for a legendary elemental hound, partners with Howden, and it has haste, so 5 mana 3/3 haste. Whenever it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, put a fetch counter on them, put a +1/+1 counter on Paco for each non-creature card exiled this way. So those cards are exiled face up. Quick question: if a +1/+1 counter gives my creature +1/+1, does a fetch counter give my creature fetch? Who knows? Anyway, jokes aside, I'm gonna make that joke every time there's a type of counter now, just so you know. Get ready for it. Bounty counters. Does it give my creature bounty? Whatever. Anyway, so Paco attacks, and hopefully your opponents are like wide open or something, because this might not get bigger than a 3/3. You might hit a land off the top of everybody's library, and then Paco just like attacked into a 4/4, and you're like, well, sorry, Paco, fetch, dog, fetch. Anyway, this card's like a dumbed down but potentially better version of Atali. You know, the 6-mana dinosaur, when it attacks you, cast the top card of everybody's library, just no questions asked. Paco and Howden are like combined their own personal Atali. Atali's obviously better than both these cards combined, but Paco has haste, which is really important. And Paco keeps the cards exiled, which means that you kind of have the option to wait later on. And I do need to go back real quick. Let's reread this. Can you play lands off of Howden? Does Howden let you play lands? It says you may play non-creature cards. So yeah, the combination here lets you play lands that you hit, and I believe the cards remain exiled. Yeah, this is really weird. I don't know what kind of deck wants this though, right? This is, again, very Joliva-esque, where you're just trying to hope that you hit good cards off your opponent. The fact that Paco is really good, but doesn't really do anything on its own, and the fact that Howden does literally nothing on his own is kind of off-putting, right? The idea here is that you get Paco out first, I think, and you just start jamming with Paco, and you try to like stockpile a bunch of cards with fetch counters on it, and then once you've seen that there's something you really want, then you play Howden and you start casting and playing your opponent's cards. So I think it's kind of neat, but it's not very potent because neither of the partners do anything on their own. This just exiles cards and gets bigger, presumably, might not even get bigger, and it has to attack to do it. I always hate attack triggers, because sometimes you're not in a position to attack and you need to throw away Paco to get some counters on stuff. But I don't know. Not my favorite partner, but Paco's kind of cool. Howden, I wish Howden did something though, right? Why does Howden suck? Why does he need Paco to be good? Who knows? Next up, we have the Black Impetus, and if you hear children screaming behind me, that's because there are children screaming behind me. Parasitic Impetus is 2 and a black for an aura. It gives the enchanted creature +2/+2, and guess what? It's goaded. And it says whenever enchanted creature attacks, its controller loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. So again, you control the aura, you're always going to gain 2 life when the creature attacks, and then whoever owns the creature you put the aura on is going to lose 2 life. But Parasitic Impetus is still kind of cool. Also note, when you go to other people's creatures with a card like this that's going to repeatedly do something, a lot of times that person will team up with someone else and say, hey, if you block and kill this creature with the aura on it, I'll go ahead and give you something in exchange, or I won't attack you next turn. And then they're like, okay, cool. And then you're just down your impetus, right? Getting one trigger off of this is not good enough. It needs to like repeatedly do it before you can justify it. And that's my problem with the impetuses, is that if these were equipments like the Bloodthirsty Blade, where you could keep moving them around and then that creature dies and then you get the option to put it somewhere else, that would be really good. But auras like this that you put on your opponent's creatures, there's just so many outs to them where they just sacrifice their own creature. They make a deal with someone to block and kill it. They bounce it, they flicker it, blah, 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 whatever. I don't think these cards are going to have that much of an impact. They're similar to the original Vow cycle, right? In fact, I think this is kind of what they're supposed to be, is a callback to the Vows, where you put them on your opponent's creatures, they gave them some sort of buff, but it stopped those creatures from attacking you. These actually goad the creatures, so they're a little bit better than the Vows, but even then, like, it's so easy to just get an aura off your own creature or make a deal with someone to kill your own creature, because they don't want to be attacked, right? So I'm not a big fan of this cycle, although I think the red one's decent. This one doesn't affect the board too much else other than just the +2/+2 and Godin. The blue one is whatever. The green one's too expensive. And the white one is neat because it does kind of incentivize other people to attack with a bunch of other stuff. But outside of the white and red ones, I'm not a huge fan of this cycle. I don't think you're going to see them outside of the precons. Anyway, moving along. We have Deadly Trick. This is our free black spell, I guess is what you want to call it. Deadly Trick, it's pretty simple. It's 4 and a black, exile target creature, instant speed, which is not, a very strong effect in Commander. There's, 100 better versions of this for Commander, but it's got that free clause where it says if you control a Commander, you may cast this card without paying its mana cost, which is actually really sweet, right? That makes it into a Slaughter Pact, right? Even better than a Slaughter Pact, right? And sometimes Slaughter Pact just gets people, oh, you're tapped out, you can't block my creature, attack you. Yeah, well, Slaughter Pact your guy. Haha. Forget to pay for my pact and die. Whatever. Deadly Trick does the same kind of thing, but with the expectation that you have a commander on board, which is not a hard thing to do. And the fact that this one falls back and says, hey, 4 mana, be a kill spell, is fine. So this card is really cool. And I expect if you care about, using single target removal spells in your deck, this is going to be pretty cool. It seems like a neat little card to have with Umezawa. The black one that lets you recast spells from your graveyard whenever a creature dies. Seems really cool there. Moving on, Okemah, the Soaring Wind, is another Jeskai commander. 2 blue, red, white for a legendary bird dinosaur with flying. It says whenever you create 1 or more creature tokens for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So every time, for the first time each turn, you make tokens, you also get a bird that just kind of comes along, right? So you make an extra token every time you make a token, which is pretty neat. It is the first time each turn, so it doesn't go infinite with itself, thank God. For 3 blue, red, and white, it says creature tokens you control gain double strike until end of turn. Okay, so we've got kind of a Jeskai tokens matters commander, which is interesting because there are now like token matters themes in blue white and red blue, but I don't know if Jeskai really had it before or not, right? Because I'm thinking like Brutaclad, which is blue red tokens matter, and then there was like Tymet from Amonkhet, the King Tut dude, which was like blue white tokens matters. Okemah does kind of give you like a token payoff commander for the entirety of Jeskai, not just any of the 2 color combinations. So it's kind of neat. It makes birds too, and it is itself a bird, so there's a little bit of like a potential bird commander tribal thing going on there too. But I like it. It's a Jeskai tokens matters commander, and I'm not sure if we really had a good version of that before. There's Kaikar, but that's more of a spells matter commander or spirits matter commander than this, which is like birds matter and tokens matter. So it's kind of cool. 6 mana, give all your stuff double strike. That can matter. But it's not like a huge selling point for the card. So Okemah, that's your other Jeskai commander for the deck. We have another set of partners here. We have the Mardu partners. Again, this is for the human deck. So Trin, Champion of Freedom, is 3 and a white for a 3/3. It is a human soldier, and it partners with Sazar, Devourer of the Free. Champion of Freedom, Devourer of the Free. Okay. At the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. I like that it's kind of like self-fulfilling, right? If you've made at least 1 token, that token can attack. And then even if that token dies, this will trigger and you'll make another token, right? So it's kind of like it fuels itself, assuming that you have some sort of benefit off of making a token each turn. And it makes a human, which matters for the deck as well. It is also a legendary human, which we've seen matters for a couple cards in the set. Namely, there's a uncommon in Ikoria that gives all of your legendary humans indestructible or something like that, which is a little weird. But let's go ahead and look at Sylvar real quick so we can see what we're doing with these human tokens. Sylvar, you can always tell Jesper Elsing's art too. It's always really kind of cartoony but kind of cool too. Like, I like this art. It's really sweet. Sylvar, Devourer of the Free, is 3 black red. Again, you're supposed to kind of like curve your 4-drop into your 5-drop here. It is a cat nightmare. Wait a second, the cats are supposed to be white on Ikoria. You messed up. Anyway, cat nightmare. Nightmare makes everything cooler. It's a 4/2. 5 mana 4/2 is not very good. It has menace, which we've seen matters in black red, kind of. And it says sacrifice a human, put a +1/+1 counter on Sylvar, Devourer of the Free. It gains indestructible until end of turn. These are partners. So the first guy makes humans so that Sylvar can devour them. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a partnership. That seems like mortal enemies. Maybe she's like creating humans so that they can be devoured, which kind of makes her a bad guy, right? I don't know. Anyway, so first off, What is this card? Falcon Wrath Aristocrat? Isn't that a card that already exists? Basically the same exact ability. If it that lets you sacrifice any creature though. But if you sacrifice a human, it gains indestructible. Anyway, so far seems pretty decent. It's a little awkward when you have like a tribal deck and then one of your payoffs for playing the tribal deck is not of that tribe, right? So you're playing a cat nightmare as a payoff to having a bunch of humans on board, which is a little awkward. It means that Sylvar won't reap the benefits of like your commander giving all your humans +2/+0 and stuff like that. Similar to the shark, right? The shark can give a human flying. It's like, would I play that in my human deck? I don't know. Or like playing Ojutai in your dragon tech because it makes your dragons uncounterable. Or Grave Titan in your zombie deck. Stuff like that, you know. It just always tweaks me a little way. I think this is a cool partnership. I don't know that you want this as an alternative to the other Mardu commander. The main Mardu commander, not the really bad pinger that we saw yesterday. But it's cool, and I like the art, and I like kind of the synergy between them, where you send a human in. Actually, I guess you're supposed to send Sylvar in because it can become indestructible, and then that makes a human off your other partner, and then you can sacrifice that human to continue making Sylvar indestructible. Plus, sometimes you can just sacrifice a bunch of humans and Sylvar gets in there for a bunch of damage. So it is a payoff for having a bunch of humans, but it doesn't necessarily directly contribute to the human strategy. So it's a little interesting. I think it's going to be cool out of the box, and if you want to build a human deck with a cat nightmare at the front of it, then go for it. Anyway, our next card is Cartographer's Hawk. This is 1 and a white for a 2/1 flyer. It says, when it deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, return the Hawk to its owner's hand. If you do, search for a plains, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So again, that's not a basic plains. This can fetch like shock lands and stuff like that, dual lands, whatever, which is kind of cool. You can go get your Mistvale plains off of this. Your idyllic Grange, I don't know. But it does have to bounce itself back, and it only works if you're attacking the person who has the most lands, or someone who has more lands than you, so it's kind of fit in that same niche as the other card we saw, where it gives you card advantage, but only if you are sending this at someone who's already ahead of you, which is kind of annoying, again, that's White's color identity, is catching up from behind instead of getting ahead. But this is neat, too. There are sometimes earlier in the game, you play this on turn 2, your opponent plays their third land, and then it gets to your turn, you attack, you go fetch up a land, and then you play your land for turn, and you're actually ahead on mana now. But in the late game, this is more like catching up than it is getting ahead. And I still just, it rubs me the wrong way that that's the way that we're pushing White, is like, oh, White's not allowed to have things unless they're behind. So it's kind of hard to stay ahead when you're ahead because none of your cards do anything when you're already ahead. So I think this is a really cool card because it is potentially repeated card advantage. And, you know, it is actual ramp this time for White, but only if you suck and you're in last place. It's kind of the vibe I'm getting for White. What's going on in the art here? This card, it looks like a really gnarly, like, Final Fantasy Leviathan or something. It is a Leviathan. Check that out. Anyway, Xerus, the Writhing Storm, is 2 green, blue, red. So we've got an alternative to the big dinosaur turtle guy. It is a 3/5 flyer, so 5-mana 3/5 flyer is respectable. Whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Alright, so outside of draw steps, you make a 1/1 anytime someone draws a card, which is pretty good, right? Obviously, there are wheels. If you wheel, you're just going to make a ton of 1/1s. It's not quite a Locust God, but it has the potential to make more tokens than a Locust God when it comes to wheeling, because it counts your opponent's draws, not just yours. It also says whenever Xerus, the Writhing Storm, deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. So again, a kind of political tool there, where you're going to be drawing so many cards by attacking them, so you got to be careful who you're attacking, or kind of make deals with people. Hey, I'm going to draw you some cards. Do you want to take 3? You just have to not use those cards on my cards. And, you know, most people will agree to that for 3 cards and 3 damage. You also will make a bunch of snakes because they're going to draw cards. So this is pretty cool. I don't know that you want this at the forefront of your deck, because the turtle that, like, copies your instance while it's tapped and gets +1/+1 counter whenever you copy stuff, that's pretty good commander, I think. But I could see this being a nice alternative. It is a more evasive commander. That one kind of just like dorkily attacks into people on the ground. Doesn't have any evasion. So if you want an evasion and you want to fill up your board with a bunch of snakes, then Xeris seems pretty sweet. Capricopio, Hydra Goat Hydra. You think they like fight with each other? Anyway, X and a green for a Goat Hydra. It starts as a 0/0 but enters with X+1/1 counters on it, so pretty standard Hydra ability there. So what it does is for 2 mana, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and then the person who activates this ability redirects who the Capricopio is attacking, right? But the only person who can activate this ability is the person who's being attacked, and they can only activate it during declare attacker. So once blocks are made, you can't activate the ability anymore. So if I attack person B, and person B is like, well, I don't want this thing to attack me anymore, person B can pay 2 mana to shift Capricopio to a different player, but it gets a +1/+1 counter. So it actually gets pretty big. And there are times where that person, you might be able to team up with somebody, say, hey, Capricopio needs to deal a bunch of damage to that guy, so I'm going to attack you, and I need you to activate this ability like 5 times to put 5 counters on this, and then choose me to attack this person. Then, of course, the person that is being attacked now has the same option. They can pay 2 mana to redirect it back somewhere. So I actually love the idea of this card. It's not great when you're really far ahead, because if you attack someone, you might just be redirected to attack into a Death Toucher or something like that. But the fact that Capricopio, if that's what it is called, gets a +1/+1 counter every time this ability is activated, I think is really cool. So, it incentivizes people to kind of shift around who's being attacked, but it also makes it bigger every time that happens. So it becomes a bigger and bigger threat, and there will be board states where people kind of fight over it, right? Who has the most mana, who can win the Capricopio fight, because they might just keep shifting around, or at least that's what I would hope happens with it. And I think that's a really neat card. Seems interesting. I can't think of any other card that can like just shift around combat that often, like Portal Maged over and over again. But anyway, next up we have Call the Coppercoats. Sounds like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Call in the Coppercoats. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, ignore me. 2 and a white for an instant. So the effect here is choose any number of target opponents, create X 1/1 white human soldier tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. But it has Strive, and the way Strive works is you can choose additional targets. So this will always get 1 target. You will choose target opponent if you just pay 2 and a white. But for each additional 1 and a white you pay, you can choose another opponent. So in a 4-person game, you can pay up to 7 mana, right? 3 initially, and then 4 for the Strive to choose all 3 opponents. And you can't pay more than that. You can only pay equal to the number of opponents you have, or additional opponents you have, I guess. And you make a 1/1 for basically each creature on the battlefield that your opponents control. So if player A has 3 creatures, player B has 3 creatures, player C has 3 creatures, and I pay 7 mana for this, I'm going to make 9 1/1 human soldier tokens. But I might only have enough mana to Strive once, so I pay 5 mana and I choose the 2 people who have the most creatures, and I'll make 1/1s equal to the number of creatures they have. So it is a nice way to kind of flood your board with humans, but only if your opponents actually have like a decent number of creatures on board. If everybody's got 1 creature on board, 7 mana to make 3 1/1s is not going to cut it. Really cool too, the fact that you can just fall back on this and say, okay, 3 mana, choose the person who has like 5 creatures on board and make 5 1/1 humans. That's pretty nice. So this can actually generate just a ton of tokens for fairly cheaply, and it can make even more tokens if other people are doing well too. So I like this card, and Strife I think is a pretty neat mechanic. So there you go. It looks like one more card to talk about here, but Sol Ring, Commander Sphere, Commander Tower, those are kind of your shoe-in cards. There was one year where they just didn't put Commander Sphere in the decks, and everybody was like, yo, what gives? What's up with that? And then I think they've been doing it basically every year since. But let's go ahead and talk about this card. I haven't seen this one yet. Barracuda of the Tide. This is 3 and a blue for a rare Pez. It's a fish, so 3 and a blue for a 3/4 fish. Any player may cast spells as though they had flash. Oh, no. Your opponents cannot cast spells during your turn. Oh, never mind. Hold on, wait a second. So, you can't do stuff during my turn. That's really weird effect to have on a blue card. I guess it's not that weird, but basically, opponents are locked out of doing stuff on my turn, but everybody at the table has a Vidalcan Orrery. Everybody, oh, that's so annoying. Look, if you don't know how priority works, then either A, figure out how it works, or B, don't play this card. Because priority, when everybody can flash everything, priority matters a lot. Whoever's turn it is has priority at all times until they choose to let other people respond to their stuff, right? So you can't just be like, oh, everything has flash, I'm going to cast this before you get to do anything. It's not how it works, right? So this is going to be a nightmare of a card where people are going to get in arguments because they're like, well, I can flash this in, right? It's like, well, you don't have priority and blah, blah, blah. But at least this mitigates kind of the danger on your turn, right? It's like, hey, I can do whatever I want on my turn and you can't stop me, right? It's got that Grand Arbiter effect to it. Or not Grand Arbiter, Grand Abolisher effect, where you kind of have free range on your turn without people casting spells or countering your stuff. But as soon as you pass the turn, all hell breaks loose. Everybody's going to be flashing everything. And I think how this is actually going to play out is nobody's going to want to do anything, right? Everyone's going to want to wait until the end step of the person who's before them to do all their stuff. But then that next person will untap and do the same thing. So everyone's just going to be like, well, I'm not doing the first move, right? You go ahead. This seems like a nightmare. I think there's a green card that actually already does this, that lets everything be flashed in, but I've never actually seen anyone play it. This has the potential to be fun, but only with people who are really savvy to the rules, right? And it might not even make that big of a deal, but it is kind of nice that if you play this, it kind of like kills your opponent's Vidalcan Orreries because it makes them like not do anything extra. So whatever. Interesting card. Dangerous card for people who kind of don't know how the rules work. And let's just double check to see if we've got any new ones. Oh my god, look at all these cards. All right, well, we clicked away for 1 second and we ended up with a bunch more cards here. Thankfully, some of them are reprints, so it looks like we've got about 7 or 8 more cards to talk about. What do you say, we keep going? Yeah, I think we keep going here instead of making a separate video. Yannick, Scavenging Sentinel, and from this point forward I have not read these cards. I don't know what any of them do, so let's go ahead and check them out. Yannick is 2 green white for a 3/3, another hill giant. This one, oh, this is the final partner commander. It's a hyena beast, which is kind of cool. It has vigilance, you know, the ability I hate the most on commander cards, and it says when it enters the battlefield, exile another creature you control until it leaves the battlefield. When you do, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures, where X is the exiled creature's power. Okay, so you exile one of your own creatures, and you get to divide up that creature's power between any number of creatures on the battlefield. Doesn't even have to be creatures you control. So I'm gonna guess the partner cares about the power of your creatures, or cares about the exiled creature, or something like that. What deck is this going to be in? This would be black, so we are going to get a mono black card that goes with this. I don't know, let's go ahead and check out the other one. So this has the potential to just be like a big vigilant beater that also like banish or priest one of your own creatures. You do get that creature back when this leaves the battlefield. Okay, Nikara, the Lair Scavenger, is the partner here. It's 2 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric. It has menace, because everything has menace, and whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you draw a card and you lose a life. Okay, that's pretty cool. So you want to get this out. You want to have a creature with any kind of counter on it. Remember, this is the Abzan deck that cares about, you know, distributing like vigilance counters and all that garbage. And then on turn 4 or later in the game, you want to play Yannick. Yannick is going to exile one of your creatures with a counter on it. You'll lose a life and draw a card from Nikara. And then Yannick will get to put +1/+1 counters on a bunch of your creatures. So when those leave the battlefield, Nikara will draw you more cards. And it is kind of nice. These are both leave the battlefield triggers, which again are just, you know, powerful abilities. It's hard to get around those. You know, you can get around death triggers by just having a replacement effect like Rest in Peace or something, exile those creatures. But leave the battlefield triggers, and that's going to happen whether they get bounce, exile, blah, blah, blah. You have to basically make creatures lose abilities to get around to leave the battlefield trigger. So Nikara and Yannick, I like the aesthetic here of Nikara, and then Yannick's got this like axe in its mouth and everything. And Nikara can draw you a bunch of extra cards too. Yannick, you have to have a creature worth exile before Yannick actually becomes that good. But it seems like a powerful duo, and I'm kind of digging it. I think Nakara is definitely the better half, but Yannick is the enabler that makes Yakara work. Nakara, so pretty sweet. Moving on, we have Fire Flux Squad, 3 and a red for a 4/3 human soldier with haste. So 4 mana, 4/3 haste, okay. When it attacks, you may exile another target attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. You do not get the creature you exiled back from the sounds of it. So you have to attack with this, and you have to attack with another creature that you're willing to lose, and it polymorphs that creature into the next creature you hit off the top of your library, which also comes in attacking. Seems like this could be pretty sweet for like a Perforos deck or Ilharg the Raise Boar. If you're just playing absurdly strong creatures, which if you're playing this card you are, then you can turn like an attacking token into just some complete devastating attacker and just completely get people. You also get enter the battlefield effects and stuff like that, so it's pretty cool. I don't know that this is the type of card that really fits my kind of play style, but if you are a big fan of your Ilharg decks out there, I think you just got another tool with the Fireflux Squad. This is kind of cool. Look at this art. Lava Brink Floodgates. 3 and a red. Artifact. Red artifact. Taps to add red. Okay, I already like it. That's pretty cool. So 4 mana artifact and mana rock that double ramps you. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put a Doom counter on Lava Brink Floodgates or remove a Doom counter from it. Okay. Then if it has 3 or more Doom counters on it, sacrifice it. If you do, it deals 6 damage to each creature. Huh. That's really cool. And it's each player's upkeep. So in a 4-person game, this goes, I play it on my turn, I can use it for mana right away, which I guess is kind of cool. And then player A goes, they put a Doom counter, player B puts a Doom counter, player C puts a Doom counter, and it wipes the board, essentially. But it also kills the Lava Brink Floodgates. Now, player C might not want their board wiped, so player A goes, yes, player C says no, remove a counter, and then it comes back to you. You kind of want to use your mana ramp and artifact, right? So you remove a counter, and then it's back to 0, and you kind of fit the same cycle. So it's really up to the will of the council whether or not they want to deal 6 damage to each creature. Obviously, the person who has like a 10/10 on board is going to be like, yeah, put a Doom counter on it. But then it comes back to you, and it's like, I could put a Doom counter on it, and I could wipe the board, but then I lose my Floodgates, and I kind of want to use it for mana, so I'll leave it up to the rest of the table. It's a really cool card. The design is awesome. It looks cool. Like, I just like these foreboding kind of castle things, and it has a real strong effect too, right? 6 to all creatures. Kind of, a more like table political tool. Like, hey guys, what's everybody going to do here? Because I'm going to play this Floodgates. The upside being that you only get mana off of it is, could be a little bit better, but it's not the worst. Herald of the Forgotten. Look at this cat beast. Look how majestic this thing is. 8 mana, 6 white for a 6/6 flying cat beast. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return any number of target permanent cards with cycle and abilities from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, well, there goes your 8 mana. So cycle. Play this thing, return all of those to the battlefield. Only permanents, you don't get to cast all the spells and stuff. And this doesn't work if you cheat it into play, right? It has to be cast. But this is a huge payoff for Cyclone. This is what you're looking for, right? This is your Rise from the Dark Realms, your Live in Death, your Comet Storm. This is your big finisher for a Cyclone deck because it just gives you so much advantage and you just get to completely crush your opponent. So Herald of the Forgotten, I think, is going to be your go-to Cyclone finisher here outside of like the enchantments and stuff like that. I see Cyclone for a Dismantling Wave, 2 and a white, sorcery. For each opponent, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Cycling for 8 mana. When you cycle Dismantle and Wave, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. That's a little bit weird because remember, a lot of the enchantment payoffs are actual enchantments, things like Astral Slide, Drake Haven, stuff like that. So having to destroy everything on board means might have to give up some of your own stuff. But I like 3 mana, blow up an artifact or enchantment that each player controls, and it's up to 1, so not everybody has to have one. But this is flexibility. It can be a mass naturalized for the board if you need it. So suck it, Brea decks. Or you can just go pop, for 3 mana. It's pretty good. 3 for 1 in Commander is exactly what you want. You want to be affecting all players at the same time. So Dismantle and Wave seems like a pretty cool addition for the Cyclone deck. Fluctuator. I'm pretty sure this is a reprint. Yeah, Fluctuator is a reprint. It says Cyclone abilities you activate costs up to 2 less to activate. And there's no cap on that, right? It's not like you have to pay at least 1 mana. No, it's just you get to cycle for free. And the Cyclone costs are so cheap that this lets you just turbo your deck out. Cycle everything away, draw a ton of extra cards. And you don't even have to leave up mana to do your cycling. You just get to do it for free. Especially with the commander that cares about cycling on everybody's turn. Fluctuator is kind of your enabler. It gives you basically a bunch of free mana that can only be used for cycling. And that's exactly what you want in a cycling deck. A little bit weird that it's a card that doesn't actually do anything outside of a cycling deck. But, you need niche cards every now and then. And then a bunch of reprints, but we also have whatever this is. Crystalline Resonance. 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Again, your cycling payoffs being enchantments a lot of the time. Whenever you cycle a card, you may have Crystalline Resonance become a copy of another target permanent until your next turn, except it has this ability. Pretty sweet. So a clone that cares about cycling. Also, this art is really cool. Awesome. This is a nice little payoff, and you can do it at instant speed, so there's a surprise factor, and it's target permanent, right? So you can become a land, you can become an enchantment, an artifact, so on and so forth. Kind of like a Mirage Mirror that's specific to the Cyclone deck. So pretty sweet overall. I have to see the Cyclone deck in action before I have a clear idea of how it's going to play. But we've got Eternal Dragon, Astral Drift, Locust God. Cool Cyclone cards. Eternal Dragon is not the best card in Commander, but it's still fine. And I think that's a good stopping point, right? Let's not refresh and see if there are any more cards because we've been talking for probably an hour or so now. Probably a little bit longer. But we got a lot of cool stuff going on here. Bunch of partners, bunch of alternative commanders, bunch of payoff cards for each of the different archetypes. And I hope there's something exciting here for you. Remember, if you're still at this point in the video somehow, still listening, let me know in the comments below which partner commanders you think is going to be the best, which one you're most excited about, and I'd love to hear from you. So again, good stopping point for us. Appreciate you hanging out with me, talking about some Ikoria Commander spoilers, and let's cut it there. Stay tuned for more spoilers from Manorox. My name's Timothy, and I will see you all next time.